annual town meeting, the town finance director, Barbara Berry, will have organized and conducted a budget process with 3 town administrators. And I think that that verges on one of a kind, if not actually one of a kind. And I just think that that skill should not go unremarked upon or should be underappreciated. Now, on the way to our visit with the assessor, and for people who are watching on television who just don't know what the Finance Committee is about, or have known but understandably have lost track over the years, here are a few thoughts. The town charter requires the Finance Committee to examine the budget and each warrant article for every annual and special town meeting, and to provide recommendations on those to the voters, which means that the Finance Committee does the public's legwork. To do that, the committee asks hundreds, over time, every year, hundreds of questions to understand the budget and each warrant article in the overall, its purposes, its themes, its advantages, its drawbacks, and inspects the details individually and in any and all combination of details. And therefore, the Finance Committee studies $100 items equally with $100,000 items. That is owed to the public to do that, and to bring to light the numbers behind the numbers. As a result of that, the Finance Committee strives for thoroughness. No politics. No politics. No agendas. The Finance Committee is neutral. That neutrality equips the Finance Committee to serve the public as a check and balance on the Board of Selectmen, who have a different function. So in that Finance Committee role, the members concern themselves with 10,000 plus residents and businesses. And to do that, the Finance Committee looks back and looks ahead and spells out ideas in a series of analytical articles that are published in hard copy and online in the annual report of the Finance Committee to the community. And that report is furnished in advance of the annual town meeting. And so that means that all of the work of the Finance Committee is to prepare itself to answer any question from any voter on the warrant and the budget therein. That preparation involves, by the time of the annual town meeting, that the Finance Committee will invest more than 300 combined hours to get ready for that one meeting. Now, turning to the assessor's budget, Madam Assessor, can you join us, please? Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Ann. This is Ann Murphy,
Julianne,
Board of Assessor, for our TV audience. So, the budget, the detailed budget is on page 5 of our book.
If you have any comments, or if there are features or highlights that you'd like the Finance Committee and the viewers to know about, please do that now.
Well, actually, it's a fairly level-funded budget. I haven't had many changes. We try to keep things, very conservative. So I'm just asking for level-funded. If you have any questions on it.
It would seem that the year-to-year difference, when you do the addition and you do the subtraction, the net is largely, if not really altogether, reflected by compensation the delta in the compensation year to year. Now, there are components. Some go up a little, some go down modestly,
Right.
some are level. Is what I
No.
just said correct as to the year-to-year overall grand
Yes.
total difference?
Yes, I would agree with that. That's correct.
Thank you. Any,
Anybody have questions for Ann?
I ask it every year. You have a level-funded budget. Some departments feel that they, there's additional services they want to provide or additional help they need to meet whatever level of service they think they have to provide to the public. You able to manage your department with the staff levels that you have there?
At the moment, yeah, things are going fairly well.
Okay.
No complaints.
Now, why did some of the things go down in your purchase of services? The data collection services went down a little and the,
Well, the data collection service, yeah, we had a 9-year cyclical program, and the DOR has now changed it to a 10-year cyclical program. So now we don't have to do as many inspections each year. We were able to kind of spread that out
Spread it
just
out
a little bit more with an extra year. So we were able to save a little bit of money on that. Yeah, kind of worked to our benefit.
So it's every 10 years that you have to inspect everything in town?
Right.
Is that it?
Right, once every 10 years, yeah.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure I knew that. Okay.
Let's try to keep the data correct.
Correct and current.
So I think their thinking behind that is for those parcels that don't get an inspection based on something else, for instance, if a parcel pulled a building permit, or if there was a sale on a parcel, those are items that cause me to go out and do an inspection. So if you have a house that hasn't done anything like that, then it could sit there for years and years and never get a second look. So with the cyclical inspections, once every 10 years, at least we're going out and doing the exterior, looking at that. If someone's home, we try to do an interior to make sure that our data is correct going forward. So that's where they've come up with that plan, so that things don't get missed. There's some people who don't pull a permit. And
Yeah, I was just going to say there
You
might
know.
be some things that are done without a permit.
yeah, people are handy. They do some things, and and then if we come along, we pick it up from the moment of discovery and go forward.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
If you sell a property, does that 10-year clock start when you sell?
No.
Or it's irrelevant, it's just a
That's
10-year?
irrelevant, right? Those would be additional inspections that would take place during those 10 years. And the reason being is when we set up the 10-year cycle, if we start going, oh, that had a sale, so that doesn't have it, then it throws it off, and then it could get missed in the next 10-year cycle, and then it might be 20 years before it gets seen, So a parcel could have more than one visit within 10 years, depending on what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
if the
And you
committee's
had-
ready for a motion,
Yeah.
then, or not?
So, I don't have any problem with anything that's in this budget here, but we just got the books. We have a new town administrator starting on Monday. Board of Selectmen haven't reviewed the budget to make sure that this is consistent with what they want. I would suggest that we, kind of walk through these, understand where you are, but at least wait until we get some feedback from the new town administrator and Board of Selectmen that this truly is the budget that they want to bring forward to town meeting before we get too far ahead of them. We don't have any issues with anything, vote all these things in one night at the end of the month or later in the cycle here versus getting ahead of them and having to, change some of our votes to reflect all the changes that they may bring forward as they discuss the budget in more detail.
I think you're right. At least I agree with you. If you're wrong, we're both wrong.
Anybody else have comments on that? Thinking about that myself.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I know at the end of this, we tend to be on fire voting all of these things that we delayed and really aren't giving them a second look. What's the likelihood of the town administrator making a change to a level-funded budget? That's just my thoughts.
Kevin, sorry.
To add on to the portions of Larry's comments I heard at the beginning when he started, in other towns, this committee is known as an advisory board. And we advise the town meeting body, completely separate from what the town administrator or what the Board of Selectmen. Sure, they could have will come in, make their opinion and make their say, but our job is to advise the town meeting body on what we think the best action is based on the information that's before us. I happen to agree with Karen's comments. I don't see a new town administrator coming in and throwing this out or changing much of anything with this because they haven't been exposed to anything yet. And I don't see any reason why to start stockpiling budgets and line items and things just to play a rapid catch-up when it comes to the end of the cycle. We can always reopen it if something goes wrong, but it's better to move forward, especially while the department's head here, and it appears all the questions have been asked and answered.
Yeah, I think I am tending to agree with that. And it's not that we might not put off some. If there's
Right, there are some that are controversial
And
or
that is true, and that we have done that before, but I think to keep track of what's been voted and what hasn't been could get cumbersome at the end when we're short on time.
You know, Mike, I'm glad I didn't agree with you.
I'll just say advisory, I kind of like where Larry was saying, I see the town administrator and the board of selectmen, they run the town on a day-to-day basis. They're bringing forward their plan for the year that has a certain dollar amount. It's up for us to, if we want to review every line item, I can see the point in doing that, but it's really to advise on the ability to support their overall plan. And they haven't had those discussions yet, so I feel like we're getting ahead of them. And, it won't take long if we go through these, we don't have any objections to anything, we could quickly vote everything in a single evening here without losing a lot of time. But I'm just worried that we're getting ahead and coming up with our budget recommendations independent of theirs, and where I think it's up to them to bring their budget plan forward.
That's the process.
And for us to decide whether we can support that and it's affordable, so, okay.
But we are supposed to be in.
And one of the questions you can ask yourself on this is, what is the expectation that anything here is going to change?
Right, well, that was my
expectation
point.
is that nothing here is.
There are things that I think
And
we
would
will
agree with
table.
that. So,
So Larry, now that you agree with both sides, what would you like to do? Would you like to make a motion?
Do you want to cut the baby in two?
Yes, I'd like to,
Thank you, Solomon.
I would like to move a motion that I vote against. Is the floor open for a motion?
Yeah.
All right.
Larry, could I just ask one thing? I mean, I would do, in past years, past 3 years ago in past, just vote on the expenses, because I do have questions on the salary portions of it that I'd like to have answered before we start, agreeing to salaries.
Well, let's see. Oh, sure. If we turn to the
so you're
Finance
advocating
Committee.
for a hybrid position?
Yeah.
No, I'd like to discuss the salaries and how they're presented and going forward at this point in time, because there's new categories here that I'm not familiar with at this point.
Well, if we look at the white tab, FinCom handbook,
Yep.
the horizontal pages, and if you turn to the Board of Assessors, you will see that there is room for 3 motions, 11412, 52,000, 54,000, 57,000, purchase of services and so forth, that stops short of the total. The total would include salaries, wages, any personnel costs, and what is identified as longevity. So if it sits well with the committee to vote on the motions 52, 54, and 57,000, we can move that part and still leave for consideration in due course the upper portion, I mean, physically the upper portion. How does that sound to the committee?
That sounds exactly what I was looking for.
I
So
have
you
a
mean
comment.
lines 16, 17, and 18? I'm going on the right.
It would be, yes, 16, 17, 18 on the right-hand side, yeah.
So I have a comment. So if we're going to break this up and we're going to revisit this again, at least once, who knows, maybe twice, and we're going to come back, it's not going to be redundant if we just don't do anything, to Mike's suggestion, and wait and vote on everything at one time. What's the point of doing it piecemeal? If we're going to come back to it anyway, why not just leave the
Well, I
whole
think
thing?
actually last year we did do it this way, because the salaries were somewhat up in the air, and we, at the end, we did all the salaries at one time, I believe.
I think the only question on the salaries right now is the 3%. We have the step, we have the chart, there is an updated chart, if I'm not mistaken. Barbara must know where that is. I haven't seen it, but if that's in place, the only thing that'd be up in the air is what we talked about on Saturday, when they do the annual COLA, is it going to be 3%? And based on what we heard Saturday, because that's what's happened with all the contracts,
Right.
so the steps will happen the way they'll happen, and the new rate will be a step, and then it'll be increased by 3% to match what's happening with the bargaining groups. So again, I don't think that there's going to be a heck of a lot of change here if we're going to stick to what Leon devised, I think it was about 2 years ago, and it gets upgraded every year. So that's just my observation. So we can argue over what
Well,
the salaries
no,
are.
if you want to
but
explain
It's on a schedule. It's on a
I wasn't
defined
here,
schedule.
unfortunately, for Saturday. What is longevity?
Oh,
And
that
how is
thing.
that composed?
That was adopted, what, a couple years ago, Barbara?
So,
Or
Otherwise, I can move the whole thing if I just get my
non-employee-
questions answered.
Or non-union
I
employees.
understand the,
I think that came in a year or two ago?
It's been a couple
Yeah, I
years.
I
2
think
years.
this is probably it's either the second or the third year. The personnel policies were updated. The longevity had always been in the union contracts, which basically is a sum of money that you get based on years of service. So it usually starts at 5 years. So 5 to 10 years, you get a certain amount of money, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and it goes up the longer you've been here. That's what longevity is. So not all the employees get longevity, but there's actually a schedule. I can get you a copy of it, but it is in the personnel policies, and it's an approved plan that's been in place. Like I said, I think this is either going on the third or the fourth year.
it's not the fourth, so it's the second or the third.
Well,
Yeah.
I believe 19 is probably the second, so 20 is probably the third.
Oh, by
So
that,
it was
'cause
here
Last
la-
year, I wasn't here, there was no such thing as longevity, so that's why.
It was longevity last year.
He wasn't here last year.
He wasn't here last year.
Oh, right, you came on after town meeting. Yep, okay. But that's what it is. So, is that your only question regarding the salaries?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I mean, you'll notice that, for the example, the assessors did not
I-
have it last year. So somebody has
I'm
reached
here
that
5 years now.
landmark, or
Right,
benchmark.
exactly.
Benchmark would be the
So
better
is it
word.
just this one dollar amount for the years 5 through 10? And then once you get to year 11, it's a different dollar amount?
no.
Yeah, I
So-
think it is.
It's every fifth year. So at year 5,
No.
you get a dollar amount.
No, and when you hit 5 years, so what, it was it $300?
250.
250, thank you. So for the budget you're looking at, once you hit 5 years, it's $250.
For every person that's eligible in that department?
In every non-union employee that falls under the personnel policies.
Okay.
And then when you get to, the next benchmark is 10. So when you hit 10 years, it goes up to, I don't know what, I don't have it.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Whatever the number is.
And you get it every year until you hit the next benchmark?
Right, so
What is it?
she'll get $250 in year 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
And then
And then in
300.
10, let's just say it goes up to 350, I don't know.
Yeah.
But then she'll get 350 till she gets to 15 years, and then when she hits 15 years, it goes up again.
And does it stop at some point?
At
or does
20
it-
years, no, at 20 years it maxes out.
Okay.
So it's not in every 5-year,
No, it's
every
a,
5th anniversary, you get a longevity pay.
No, you get it every year.
You get every year in addition to
Yes,
it.
and it's
That's
similar- and
not
that's
the way I
exact-
understood the program worked.
Yes, and that's exactly what happens in the union contracts, all of the union contracts, even on the school side.
But it's initiated at the end of year 5. Once you hit 5,
When you
the
hit
process
5.
begins.
Yes, and so I don't,
Through 5, there's
0 to 4, right.
Nothing. Okay, then I'm good with the whole budget. That's the answers I was looking for. You can move the whole thing.
we're on the assessors, Jared, for your
Okay.
information. You were lost. There he is,
Do
go ahead.
we, every year, one of us asks to be doing this properly, legally. Do we do only the grand total, which I doubt, or do we do each line with a separate motion and vote?
You know,
We were doing each,
Do you remember?
I do. When I was chair, it was the whole budget you voted, and then that implied that everyone agreed with every line item. If there was someone
Right.
wanted to hold out a line item, they
Then I
asked you
think
to
we-
hold it out of their motion, and then you went on. Just made the
Yeah, I think
process
we
move
just did-
smoother.
Yeah, one line.
So our motions were for, if you're looking at assessors, it's the personnel cost, line 15, then purchase of services, 16. Those are the lines that we would have voted the total there.
Well,
Not the department total of 142, 196. It's not how
no, I
we
think the
voted.
point is if you vote
142, 196, you're accepting.
you are accepting everything that makes up that number.
Correct.
Well,
I'm
I'll
okay
make,
with that.
I'll move a motion if the chair will recognize.
Yes.
If it's seconded, we can discuss the motion.
Yes,
All right,
clearly we're a little rusty.
yeah, all right. With respect to the budget for the Board of Assessors, I move approval and recommendation to the annual town meeting, a total of $142,196, which is the sum proposed.
Second. But I do have one thing as far as how this is presented to the town meeting. We will see the department head salaries, wages, and longevity as separate line items this year, and not have them rolled up into one number with a
We are seeing the department head separate. Is that
I mean,
correct?
salaries and wages,
Yeah.
just like it's presented
Yes.
here, they'll get their own numbers back, and not like last year's.
Back
Yes.
to the old way.
Yeah, so.
Yes. Any other discussion on the assessor's budget?
Yes, but it's not assessor specific. So if you're doing it that way, because that includes the personnel line item, we haven't had any discussion on, other than what we heard Saturday and what Jim mentioned here, that the personnel costs are, especially for the department heads, are driven on the plan that Leon brought forward a year or two ago. We started implementing last year. There are step increases in there. There's the annual general wage adjustment in addition to the step increases. Some line items have bigger numbers than others in there. So without looking at each one or having any discussion about the overall plan, it sounds like we're just accepting that implementation of that plan at those recommended levels and don't need to have any further discussion on that.
The motion has a scope only of the Board of Assessors.
Okay.
But for that line, we are certainly accepting that.
Everything, all the components when added up,
I think
hit
you've
that
already,
number.
as a committee, already accepted the policy. You approved it last year in that budget. So
Right.
you've already approved the policy, you know?
And to be clear, I don't have any objections to it, it's just that there are, somebody could have their eyes go big on a couple of these line items, and, I don't know if we want to discuss individual ones or the
That's why
policy
you
in
know
general.
what
I'm
composed
okay
the
with the
line
policy in
items.
general, realizing, there's a range of salary increases across here. Each one is for, that individual in the position that they're in, and is part of that overall plan, so.
Well, this
I'm
is
okay
part
with
of documenting it in the appendix of the book, too. You'd like to see that scale. I think that Jim discussed, here's what department heads get paid, here's the schedule for them, so people
I
can...
still have it from last year, and it existed the year before. And just to be clear, when you look at the grades and you look at the steps, the further someone is at the low end, the higher the increment is as they move through the steps. So at the low end, they could be moving at a step of 5 or 6%. And by the time they move from grade 9 to the max, they might only be moving 3%. So it gets progressively smaller. The constant is the COLA, which is going to be 3% perhaps, but that can vary from year to year depending on what they come up with from the CPI.
Right.
But that does shrink, and it shrinks across all the categories. I went through and checked, and I can see where it goes from 4.7 to 4.07 to 3 point something, and it just keeps getting progressively smaller as the salary goes up. That
Yeah.
step
This is all
increase
part
decreases.
of making this information present in our book, so the voters are aware of what they're actually voting for.
And there's also going to be a warrant article, let's remember, that I believe sets a goal for the new town administrator to take this out for bid and to get this done by an outside professional firm, to get all this stuff done at arm's length, no inside input, just a survey, a general survey of like communities to Sturbridge to find out what everybody else is doing and what's fair and equitable. And it takes Personnel Committee, Mary Blanchard mentioned, it takes the Personnel Committee right out of it. It was their recommendation. That way, it's an outside entity that's doing this, and nobody can point fingers.
I guess we'll see the details when that article comes before us.
Right.
Right.
So you have,
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the assessor's budget? Opposed? Abstaining? We have, how many people are here now? 7, 2, 4, 7.
601.
So 601. Thank you. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Ann.
There was a lot of discussion not related to the assessor. Sorry you had to get wrapped up in that.
Sometimes it's hard to be the first.
We're gonna fight with each other for a couple of weeks before this.
Yes, next is
Oh, she's in trouble.
Lynn Gerard with the town clerk as well as elections and registration. So that would be on, let's see, page 9 and 10 of the budget detail.
it's split.
It's split.
Really?
Well, town clerk is one budget and elections and registration is
Oh, I
another.
see.
Yeah.
Oh, it's on page number.
Not on there.
Oh, no, 9 and 10 of the detail.
Thank you.
And, let's see, who has that? Is that, where's the town clerk? Where can I find it? Oh, Bruce.
Bruce
Oh,
Boyson.
is not here. Okay. Well, then.
So basically with the budget recommendations for the town clerk's recommendations, you know, everything basically is level funded. The biggest increases, or should say is decreases would be the elections and registrations. And the fact is that this year, this coming fiscal year, we only have 2 elections coming up, which would be the state primary and then your annual town election in 2020. So that's why for a little bit of the decrease.
Well, how many were there, or are there this year?
This year,
Fiscal
there
19.
was 3. Because you had the September, the November, the September, and, no, you had September and the election. So
The
2.
primary, then the election in the
Election.
fall.
In
Right.
19?
Yes, no, in 18.
Oh, yes, yeah, that's
Right.
right, yeah.
It's a fiscal
So it
year.
varies from
I
year
was
to
thinking
year
of,
on that
that was
line, those line items.
2019. Yeah, okay, sorry.
So that's why some of those
Confused.
decreased. We did go up in a few things on purchase of services, like the census and the street listing books. Those just have gone up through the vendor. And machine maintenance, that's basically stayed the same. So we've basically been level funding. We do have an increase in some of the supplies and early voting storage. That's an increase of $700. Early voting is not going to go away. So we do need to store those early voting ballots. So we need containers, and that's what the price on that is, for those containers to store the early voting ballots. The current state storage containers we have now are starting to deteriorate slowly, so we'll be looking to replenish some of those. And then also a ballot box. We're looking to have a separate area for absentee voting and early voting. And you'll see that this year at the annual town election. We're going to be reconfiguring the voting location, making it a little bit more easier to flow, and have a separate area for early voting and absentee processing. We had a lot of people that were a little concerned as we're going through with the early voting and the absentee ballots, and we had extra poll workers that were trying to feed them through to the ballot machines, and a lot of people like, what are all those ballots doing? And so we thought we would kind of designate a certain area so people would be aware, and they could still view and watch it, but we wouldn't be disrupting the flow of those precincts 1, 2, and 3. So that's the reason for some of those things, for the increase. And other than that, it's basically level funded.
But I see the constable line has gone from 600 to 1,200 to 1,600. What is the reason for that progressive increase over 3
We
years?
have a constable, there should be a constable in every precinct. And 2 of the precincts are in the same room, so we can utilize
Yep.
that one constable for 2 precincts. But we've never had an additional constable in
Across the hall?
precinct 3, which is in
Okay.
a separate room.
Across the hall, yeah. What about here at the town hall when you're having the,
Early
Early
voting,
voting,
you don't need
you
a
don't need one?
constant, no.
okay.
And we've been, fortunate, we've done the early voting twice now through the town clerk's office, and it's run rather smoothly there. So we haven't had a big increase, for expenses on that, and it does seem to work out quite well.
Does the state pitch in anything for the early voting? Weren't they supposed to at one point?
They do. They've given us about $250. That's basically the cost. Well, that was our cost. We don't have, really, I don't bring in really extra poll workers. My assistant and myself do it. Saturday, I did the first year. We didn't know what to expect. And everybody was saying, oh, Saturday is going to be, crazy. So I had a constable in. I had myself plus 2 poll workers and my assistant. And we probably had 45 people that came in all morning thinking. And the first day of early voting, I did over 450 people, just myself. Because my assistant at the time.
On a weekday? On a weekday?
My assistant at the time was out sick, and it was just, I had help from Barbara and Chris, and other people came in and just helped out. It was just crazy. So it's very, very popular.
Anything different on the town clerk budget at all?
No?
Wait a minute, Joni had a question, because she's not here. Have you gotten that software for the committees? I think that was a
Yes, we're working on it right now.
reserve fund, was that a
we have-
reserve fund transfer? I
Yes,
forget.
the on-board, that was,
Yes, yeah.
yes. So we're working on it right now. We were able to give all the information over to the company.
Oh, so it's
and
still in the works,
It's
it's not
still in the
really?
works, right. They've got all the information. We've done some training on it, and they're still doing some tweaking to it because we're adding a few things to it.
So it's not really up and going?
It's not up and running yet, no.
Okay.
No.
That
How
was her
far
question.
back are you going in populating who was on what board when?
We're just moving forward on this point, going forward. I've asked all the departments to look at their boards and to go back and, hopefully give me some information, because they're wanting.
Starting with where we are today, moving forward, you're not going to go back and find out in 1923, here was a
No,
selectman or
exactly,
whatever. Okay.
exactly, yeah.
So if you know when you were appointed, could you tell Lynn, because I have no idea when she
Right,
asked me.
exactly.
I have no idea when you were appointed. I didn't even remember when I was appointed, so I certainly don't know when you all were appointed.
Basically,
I would go down and ask the town clerk because I got sworn in and she filled out a form and put it in some register down there.
Well,
so-
Mike would have, well, that's what I said. I think that's what I told you. I think Mike would have, hopefully has.
He does.
going forward, we're hoping that we'll get a good handle on it.
Okay, I think that was really her only question. Any other questions? Oh, Larry.
Just a bare moment before the start of the meeting, I was handed a letter addressed to the Finance Committee. The contents of the letter are relevant to the office of the town clerk. And I was asked to read it aloud, verbatim. It was asked by the writer of the letter, who said that her name should be read with the letter as the signer of it.
Oh, okay.
Is this a timely moment to do that? It's 3 paragraphs short.
You always say short, Larry. Oh, okay.
Well, the earlier part actually was 3.75 minutes. So there. It's dated March 26, 2019. Dear Finance Committee members, I am writing you to ask that you consider a very important element that our town clerk brings to her position beside that which is obvious or measurable to a personnel committee. That being the amount of knowledge and experience that Ms. Gerard brings to her position, the amount of assistance she is able to provide to all of our departments is truly unique. Never a day goes by that some department is not stopping by or calling to inquire about how something was done in the past or where information was kept, etc. I am sure you will agree that in these times, it is rare in a municipality to have someone with so much experience, never mind in multiple departments, to be able to rely on for historical, procedural reference. Sincerely, Sheila O'Connell, who has, as Assistant Town Clerk, more than 20 years municipal experience. I think it can be accurately said that she is not a rookie, that she knows what she's looking at. That last was my own editorializing. The letter stopped with her name.
Well, thank you. So,
Actually, I have a question too. Just want to make sure, although the town clerk is an elected position, should she be treated like a department head when it comes to the salary line item?
I thought last year, she is in a salary grade, and she is part of that salary program for the grade,
Yeah.
and gets the
I
step
believe that is
increase.
true, yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that she's, because in the past, in the long time past, there's always been a fight about, the town clerk, past town clerks have had this fight about whether or not they should be treated like a town employee or not. So,
Right.
okay. So, thank you for clearing
Yeah, I
that.
think it has been different in the past, as I recall.
Okay.
But yes, I think last year it became quite clear that it was.
So
Under Leon's new, the former town administrator's salary scheme, yeah.
So seeing that the liaison isn't here, I'd be willing to make a motion to approve the town clerk's budget at $107,914.
Second.
All right, let me get the page up.
You know what line that is?
It's 28 to 31.
31.
They'll change slightly. Those will change because you'll be adding in new line items. For the salaries and wages, things will be new line items, right?
No.
Yeah.
Say that again?
You don't, the line items are the actual salaries, wages, and longevity. It's not the total.
It is broken out, isn't
That's
it?
how it was in the past.
It has personnel cost as line
There is a
28.
change. We rolled up
No.
Aren't you? I don't know why you don't sit closer.
So the past 2 years, we had just voted personnel costs as a
Right.
total. As a compromise between what we were trying to do on the town side and the transparency that Board of Selectmen wanted to see in the budget book, your line item budget. We have gone back to listing in the line item budget under the FinCom handbook tab of your spiral book, each of the line items. So you'll see the count number, department head salary. Then you'll see an account number if it pertains to the department's salaries and wages. You'll see an account number, longevity, if that department has longevity.
Right.
And you'll see an account number overtime, if overtime pertains to the department that you're looking at. At town meeting, town meeting will only be voting the personnel costs. So they'll see the detail, so that they know what makes up that number, but they'll only be voting the total, just like we were doing before. The reason for that, and we have the example again this year, the same example kind of that I used last year, but right now, we have a lot of vacancies in the police department. Due to those vacancies, the overtime budget is running over 80% currently, okay? The salaries and wages account is running below where we should be this time of year. We will, with a request from the chief and a signed approval by myself and the town administrator, we will transfer money between the overtime budget and the salaries and wages budget. What that does is it makes it so that we can continue operations without having to go to town meeting or come for a reserve fund transfer. And so that was what we were trying to have happen when we went to just voting the personnel costs as a single line, and this allows us to continue it, but gives the detail back that some taxpayers, as well as the Board of Selectmen, were looking for.
But
So you will
Barbara-
not be voting each line individually.
Okay.
Okay, also, and I know, I did bring this up, I know you weren't here on Saturday. We also did the same thing with the snow and ice budget. You'll see in the snow and ice budget the same thing. There's not an actual line next to purchase of services, overtime, or supplies. There's just a line number next to the total. We have this issue, and I'm not sure, I haven't looked recently since the last storm, but we only had, going into the last snowstorm, we only had one account that was overdrawn. but technically, because we vote the snow and ice budget as 3 different lines, we had a deficit. Okay? So what I'm trying to have happen is total snow and ice budget, 3 different accounts. If one goes over, I can move money and not have a deficit. Right now, I'm going to have a warrant article, because of the way we voted it, to fund, at the point when I was looking at it, 1 account in deficit, even though 2 other accounts might be in the black. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do, but I'm still giving the detail to town meeting that this is how much we budget for personnel, for overtime for personnel. This is how much we budget for purchase of service, which is all the plowers that we hire, the contractors, and then supplies, what we spend on salt, et cetera.
Can I follow up on this conversation? So, I mean, I like the idea, I think, but is it written where the approval is? I know you said it's a combination of you and the town administrator, but who oversees it? Like just another, did the Board of Selectmen check mark it too and just say, okay?
Nope, the Board of Selectmen do not. So when we implemented that personnel costs, so I think this is the second, fiscal 19 is the second year, I believe, that it's been that way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but-
It is, yeah, I
is.
believe it's the second year. yeah.
Okay. So when we went through that route, we had discussions that it was going to be, basically, department head would bring the request to me. It seemed justified, and it has to be justified, too. Obviously, I'm looking at everything, and we're not just going to move money just to move it.
And I trust, but you may not always be here, so,
But then,
yeah.
when I'm not, someone else can change the policy if you don't feel comfortable with the person in the chair. But, so what I do is I talk to the department head, they bring the request to me, I take a look at everything. The other thing, too, is what I'm making sure is that if we move money, in the example I just gave, from salaries and wages to overtime, or overtime to salaries and wages, that's not going to make that other account be overdrawn too,
Right.
okay? And then if I agree that there is sufficient money and that there's a valid reason for it, again, a valid reason would be the example I just gave, because that's unforeseen. Yes, could I go to the reserve fund? I could, but we also don't want to be using large chunks of money when it's something like that with the salaries and the overtime, because that makes sense of why one is over and one is under. Then I take it to the town administrator. We have a form that I had made up the first year that this went into effect. We both signed the form, goes to the town accountant. He then makes the entry. And again, we're audited every year. Our auditors look at, just like they look at all the reserve funds that you guys are transfers that you guys are doing, they're looking at the same thing with the transfers between accounts.
And the auditors have had no problem
They have
with it?
had no problem with it. And I mean, it was fiscal 18, they did audit. Obviously 19 is still happening.
So thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome.
Barbara,
One more question?
just another question, and I'm using town clerk because we're on that one right now. But when this comes to a vote at town meeting, so personnel cost is comprised of two line items.
In that
If someone wants to
That one.
question, right, but if someone wants to question that, they can just hold it, and the town moderator will hold until we move on, and when we come back, then the person can drill down into a particular area they want to ask the
That's how I
question about.
envision it, yes. And then if they said,
That's what I'm,
we want to give Lynn a $10,000 more raise,
yeah.
then we would do that. And then we would know going forward that that's what the discussion on town meeting floor was. So I don't know what the total of her salaries is, but it would increase by the $10,000. And then I'm sitting there and I know what the intent was. The town accountant's sitting there, he knows what the intent is.
Yep.
The town clerk is taking the minutes of the meeting, so she knows what the intent is, and then we just move forward.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second? And the town clerk budget only.
That's the 100,000
That's the
and 12?
107,000.
107,914. It's line items 28 to 31,
28, that's correct, 28 through 31.
right here, town clerk.
I must have a different set of numbers.
You in last year's book?
I'm in last year's book.
Boy, we're rusty.
Says our number.
This meeting.
Pages aren't numbered? I'll do myself.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Hearing nothing further, all in favor of the town clerk's budget? I believe that's unanimous, 7-0.
Okay, so I'd
to
follow up with a
elections.
motion to approve the elections and registration budget at $28,448.
Is there a
I'll second it.
That's on elections and registrations, lines 32, 33, and 34. Any discussion? All in favor? That's 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks,
Have a nice evening.
Is what, the 26th? Yes. Let's write these down. Next is Nelson.
Good evening to the board.
Yes.
Hello.
We have the building department.
Let's see what page you're on here, Nelson. Page 25, the detail. And that is, who has
So
that?
page 7.
Oh, that's you, Jim. That's you, so.
Hey, Nelson, long time no see. 4 hours, 5 hours?
Which page in the bond detail?
Page
There are no.
7. There's no numbers, but it's the 7th page.
Okay.
It's the last section of the 7th page. I've been over this in great detail.
I think I've gone way too far. All right, let's see. Nelson, do you want to say anything before we get questions, or?
It's pretty much, level funded. There's a couple of small things. One of them is the books, and what happens with the books is they're supposed to be changed. The building code's supposed to change every 3-year cycle. But what happens in Mass is they don't always follow the schedule, so you never know when that 3-year cycle is gonna come. On the street, they're saying it's gonna be this year for 18, but of course, they said that last year too. So it could be that all that money will go back, but if we don't have it, we can't buy them. So it's sitting there. If they change it, we buy the 18. If we don't, we kick the money back.
So how is it they don't know?
It's just the way it's set up. It has to be voted on to change the code, and they just don't do it. Like that'll be 18. They're actually doing the 2020 code. 18, 19, 20, 21 codes right now, because it's a 3-year cycle. So, and there was 1 year, 2012, they actually skipped that whole cycle. We never even had it. We went from 9 to 15. Mass, but it's only the great state of Mass. We have amendments and everything. We're very unique, Massachusetts, as far as the building code goes.
These are codes for electric and
Yes,
plumbing
electric, plumbing,
Gas.
gas, yes.
Because we have propane, even though we don't have.
Yeah, some of the other books we need is NFPA 72, NFPA 13. 13 is sprinklers, 72 is the alarms, and I have to have them too because they split it. A lot of existing is a fire department, anything new is under me, so I have to know all the regulations on them too.
How much of that has to be coordinated with, for instance, apprenticeships and with educational institutions where kids are getting trained to be electricians and plumbers and so forth? Do they have to coordinate all this? Is it that widespread that it has to get all, I assume it has to get down to that level? Because the schools have to be teaching the kids the codes if they're going to enter the trade.
Yes, they do. I've actually done seminars at the school with the books and stuff at Tantasco. You want to get them in a mode that when they graduate, they know a direction and where to look for to get their licenses and everything, and what the requirements are, because there's a lot of requirements. You almost have to be in it for a while to understand it, so.
Other questions?
A question. Saturday, the police chief was here, and one of the topics we discussed was funding for a drone. And one possibility he mentioned, in addition to the police force, it might be used by the inspector. Could you imagine any scenario where you could utilize a tool like that?
Possibly on a roof, either a high building or something. Because all roofs, I usually don't go on them. I use binoculars, and a drone would help me to see certain areas like cheek walls and stuff that maybe you couldn't observe. So I could, if they let me use it, I could see me using it. Maybe crash it or whatever,
Oh, no, it has to be a pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see, realistically, I don't honestly see that happening. We're not pay a police officer to fly a drone over a roof to see if it needs to be repaired, the cost of the personnel, it would be hard to justify.
Yeah. I guess there's quite a bit of training, and I guess it
Yeah.
sounds like an actual license, so,
It's a pilot's license.
Yeah.
yeah. And they did call it a pilot, but anyway.
Okay,
Interesting.
thank you.
So I don't have any questions on your budget, but just level of activity in your office. I mean, that drives permit revenues that come in. It could drive future growth if there's a lot of construction and new construction going on in town. Can you give us an idea as to what the level of activity around town is and what you see happening in the next year or so?
We've been staying pretty busy, and there's a lot of new growth in town as far as, you know, not Yogi Bear now, but Pine Resorts. Of course, you got Panera Bread. You got Paws, where the old Candy Mansion was. So there's quite a bit of commercial work going on. Some new houses, I think more commercial than new houses.
There were two housing, there was one down Fairview Park Road and then the Downey Road one. Are they moving forward?
Downey Road, I haven't heard much about, so I don't know what they're gonna do. What was the other one you said?
The condo apartment complex down
Oh,
on
that 40B?
40B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what happened there is, there's like 100, I want to say 105 units. And they didn't realize they had to pay $8,000 roughly each for the tie-ins for the water. So don't quote me exactly, but somewhere around 800,000. And that's what has put that on hold, because they're trying to figure out how to finance that extra money for it. But he says, because I talked to Mr. St. Laurent, he says they're still going to do it, though. It's just, they're trying to figure out.
It's town water and town sewer.
Yeah, I think it's the tie-in for both.
Yeah, there
It's
would
per
be water,
unit, and there's
sewer.
like 100-plus units there, so you're talking, you know, close to $1 million, 800,000.
How about the renovations, the upgrades, what I call the regular day-to-day upgrades?
A lot,
that
you
get
see a lot of
involved?
basements and stuff being done, yes, kitchens. There's a lot of renovations in town.
You think the compliance is high with people pulling permits?
Yeah, I think, you know, I still think there's people that don't pull permits, let's put it that way. If I see something or whatever, I mean, I don't go out of my way, but if I see it, I will stop and knock on the door and question it, you know? Like I'll see a truck out there, but you never know, you know, you don't ever know what it means exactly, so you gotta be
I mean, it could
careful
just
with
be a repair.
it. Right,
so
right.
It's hard, yeah. No, I suppose if you see it for days, then you might know that it's not just a normal repair at that point.
Yeah. And the other thing with my department, a lot of the activities is the zoning too. Complaints, violations, stuff like that, you know.
So you're the zoning enforcement officer?
Yes, he is, yeah.
I watched the meeting last week, and you're getting your paperwork all lined up to take an action on that house down there. What is it,
7 Main.
Street?
Yes, yes.
That-
We're waiting for the
That's
new,
boarded up?
when the new TA comes, I'm asking permission to talk to town council.
Is that owned by a financial institution, or who owns that?
It is, but that's the problem. We want to make sure that our notice goes to the right person, because when you're tearing something down and you don't own it, and it belongs to a private party, you've got to make sure you get the right people. It's the same way, say there was a foreclosure, and I bought a few of them. You've got to be careful there too, because they don't always know. Kathy would know this. They don't necessarily already know who owns it, and there's a clear, same deal with that, just the reverse. So you got to do a lot of research. So I don't feel comfortable until, and when I go to town council, if the TA lets me and he agrees to it, we're gonna take and actually go to court, because then the court will order it down. But that's another way of noticing, for notice for that property, and that way you can't really go wrong. They can't come back to us and sue us for improper notice, and it just makes the whole thing clearer, simpler, and
But it creates a path for you to sue them to recover your costs for what you did, the work you
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, right.
Well,
yes, but.
you know, that question was asked at the selectmen's meeting. Mike asked it, and I didn't have an answer at the time, but since then I've thought about it a lot. And, because we had that $75,000 they gave us to do that. And the question was by Mike is when we go to town council or get an opinion, is it coming from that? And I didn't have an answer, and I should have said right off, yes, and I'll tell you why. And Barbara will agree with that, I think, because if we go over, she can still get us more money, but when we go to recoup, if we end up with a property, you can go against all the money you spent. So you want it documented that you spent it. So yes, it should come out at 75,000. But, you know, I didn't have an answer that night, but then I got thinking about it, that, you know, that would be my answer now.
The attorneys leave it.
Larry?
I wonder if there has been either a change or a repeal of a bylaw that prohibited the use of commercial banners or flags, commercial flags, not the U.S. flag or mass, those vertical devices that kind of go in the wind back and forth. They'll say O-P-E-N, that sort of thing. Those, including certain use of neon lights that simulated movement, such as a Hawaiian grass skirt sort of a thing, that was in place. But I'm wondering if it's been repealed or changed to allow for the presence, which are probably beginning to be close to the dozens of them.
The ones that move around in the wind, the way our bylaws are worded, my opinion is it's allowed. Neon lights, you know, and signs and stuff, they're not allowed. But the big thing even with those is the way that's worded in the zoning too. It, because you can't regulate inside a building, and they say, you know, if they're to the window of the building itself, it's not allowed. But say it's 2 or 3 feet back, well, then it's allowed. Well, to me, you're gonna see 2 or 3 neon signs. You see them whether they're 2 or 3 feet back or right on the window. So I think some of them things should be looked at and changed. I mean, you gotta remember, I'm only a code enforcer, and being a code enforcer, a lot of times the bylaws should be adjusted and made really clear so there's a definite direction, because my problem is if it's not real clear, it's always a decision, you know, and in my opinion, it might be different than your opinions or whoever. So the clearer the bylaws are, the better. So I think if there's things like that maybe bother you, come on down to the office, we'll look at the bylaws, and I'll explain to you my opinion of why I think in such a way, and then maybe we can come up with an idea of how it could be worded different and changed, and we could see Gene, and maybe it could get changed, and maybe it'd be the way we really want it, you know?
Well, thank you for the invitation. I would like to say that it does not bother me, and it does not bother me.
Okay.
I tried to frame the question, as I think I did, to ask
Yeah.
if it's been repealed or changed.
Okay.
And I do recall, just so happens I was one of 3 or 5 people who, as laymen, and they went through the town council, of course, drew up the original bylaw on that. And it must be 25 years ago. And basically, what Sturbridge did was go to Nantucket and go through the Nantucket bylaw and change the words from Nantucket to Sturbridge, thinking precisely about the waving and the things that seem to be present now. But I want to emphasize, I am not bothered, and I am not bothered as I sit here.
Very good.
Thank you for the invitation.
Any other questions? Jim, would you like to make a
I'll
motion?
make a motion. I'll make a motion that we, the section building inspector line, to approve lines 75, 76, 77, and 78, totaling $125,729.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Now, Nelson, do you also talk to us about the electrical and plumbing inspector budgets?
Sure.
While you're here.
That makes sense, huh?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you oversee them. Do you oversee them?
Yes, yes.
Oh, well,
So,
then yes. Then
yeah.
by all means.
It's level funded from last year, basically, and from 18, it had went up a bit, and what it is, again, I had talked to Barbara, and we had ran over some, and they wanted to get away from, you know, having to, at the end of the year, readjust. And hopefully this year, we'll be all set with that 27.5. It seems like we're right there, you know, so.
So I'll ask a question. How is that paid? Is that paid based on a case-by-case basis?
Yes,
Okay.
they do an inspection, they get paid for the inspection.
So if they don't do $55,000 worth of
Right,
inspection,
right,
you don't spend
yeah, it's a,
55.
it's a guess, it's an estimate.
Any other questions? No, my phone is going off here. Would you like to make a motion, Jim?
I'll make a motion that we accept under inspectors, electric and plumbing, the proposed amounts on lines 80, 81, 82, and 83 totaling $58,465.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
Can I ask just a dumb question before I did? I wanted to get interrupt before we did that, because I just wrote the numbers down. 55, 2,465, 57, oh, it adds up, all right. For 1 second, I thought it was off by $1,000. I'm a little rusty.
I think that's actually in a Excel spreadsheet, isn't it?
It's
Isn't it
happened.
added?
I mean, there's not an error in the
Couple of
spreadsheet.
cells have been skipped.
Oh, all right. All right, thank you, Nelson.
Thanks,
for
Nelson.
coming by.
Well, hang on.
Oh, and you have
Sealer weights and measures also part of this, or is that a
No.
separate one?
That's
Okay.
Bob right there.
that comes under Barbara for some reason. Did you look at the revised, the agendas I sent out?
Have a good evening.
Apparently not that
Nelson.
close. I know she's coming up.
Okay, all right. What else? I don't think we have anyone else.
There's no one
tonight,
else
do we?
scheduled tonight.
No, we don't, wow.
At this rate, Larry's not going to get 300 hours in this year.
I do have a generic question, though.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what past practices, it used to be a little more amorphous. This is very specific as to what's going to be considered in a particular meeting. Like, for instance, I would move my education line items tonight, but it's not part of there. Now, I know in the fine print, we say items can be brought up that may or may not be there. So is that allowed at this point?
No, it wasn't on the agenda, I must say. That's a pretty big one.
That's a big
Education.
issue to vote on with it
Yeah,
not
that-
being on the agenda.
Yeah.
And typically, they would come in and
They
explain it
usually
one
come
more
in.
time to the, even though we've gone there and the public's had an opportunity to attend the school committee, they've
they
always come in to
usually-
explain that one.
At least
So
a
you
little-
will be inviting them?
Yeah, we
Oh,
usually do,
okay.
yeah. I haven't slotted them in yet, but, you know.
Do we feel there's a need to invite them? As liaison, I don't. I'm comfortable with moving their budget as there is now.
Really?
The education budget?
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
it's the biggest
Budget.
budget
okay.
in the whole town.
It is. I know. I understand that.
So there was a discussion on Saturday about some departments looking for some additional help. Some of those involve public health and safety. I know we typically don't push back on the budgets presented by the school, but given the large amount of dollars in there, and the overall increase in people looking maybe for some additional staff, in the town department, the issue is we just give them what they ask for, or is there a discussion we had to see if we can pare back a small amount of money to fund one or two other positions on the town side that we mayor, selectmen, and town administrator may or may not.
What
accept.
is that small amount of money that the town needs?
I don't know what might be coming forward, if anything, for
If
that.
it is it, so you're saying it's something in addition to what's in this printed book?
Maybe, yeah.
I think that there were some requests that didn't make it into the budget, yeah.
Nelson had one for more staffing.
Yeah.
And the police chief had, a concern about his, number of dispatches and potential need for more. There was a request for him to come back with some scenarios, level funding, same staff levels and some slight increases in staff levels and costs and improvement in service and coverage over there, and that I think he's working on and, will be brought forward, may be brought forward for discussion. I guess my question is a general one. Do we, I know the school department spends a lot of time going through their budget. They get a lot of credit for controlling that budget. From time to time, it seems that they have some excess monies in there. not necessarily built in, but, you know, they take advantage of. And, you know, from an overall allocation of the funds we have available in our budget, do we just give them what they ask for and work around that? Or, you know, do we need to look at some other level of funding?
Unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't here, well, it would be noted that I wasn't here at the Saturday meeting. Do we have any idea of what the dollar figures are attached to these numbers that are not presented to us to consider?
In some cases,
Some cases there
yes.
were,
I think,
but those were very small areas.
Yeah.
I don't think that we had numbers from the
I mean,
police.
technically, we still have $89,192 that can be assessed and taxed, that doesn't affect any of the budgets that presented in this line item, as they're done here. So if those additional considerations are below that number, there's really not a problem.
When a number gets that skinny, I have a problem approaching it. That's a pretty skinny number, $89,000.
That's only to our levy limit.
Right.
When it comes to the education budget, there can be some questions that are nothing more than a search for information, such as what the school department, both local and regional, project for underwriting programs that are through time, 3 to 5 years, that are currently paid for by the school choice inbound tuition. That is a decision made by an innumerable number of households annually. And in light of the policy of trying to keep siblings in the same program. Also, is there, as the saying goes, a pig in a python? Where are the elementary school populations starting to dip or increase, which, if you assume there won't be any significant change in the total number of students in the third grade who become fourth graders and so on, one day, what does that mean to the junior high and high school budgets? That's foreseeable. That in special needs, because it is such a strong special needs program, there are many out-of-district students. At what point would there be a need for the special needs special school buses? And what is the rotation? How many miles and what kind of condition the buses are in? Because those are not small ticket items. It's questions like that to just bring to light their thinking and their projections.
Those were all presented at both public hearings, but I have no problems having them come in to do that. All that information was at both public hearings.
not everybody here was at both public hearings either. I couldn't make
But
that
that's
meeting.
why they were there.
I think historically, that meeting is kind of an overview for us.
I mean, I don't feel
We
like I
don't
dug
really
into
have
that,
a chance
those
to-
budgets yet.
Fair
Yeah.
enough, if you know if it's practice to bring them in.
I mean, because
Bring them in.
unfortunately, we didn't even get, sometimes we've gotten those budgets ahead of time, but this year
Not
we
this year.
got them at the meeting. And so, I mean, I think I found it hard to really delve into it as they were going along. I mean, I'd rather have that
Okay.
opportunity to look at it.
You can see
All those deeper.
generational activity in the faculty and staff. Perhaps in 3 to 4 years span, a lot of experience goes right out the door because they retire. Are they being replaced philosophically and practically by cheaper faculty who are, in another 2 years, they'll have their master's degree? Or are they going to be backfilled with seasoned people who are lured from other districts?
For this year, the retirement's being replaced at a lower cost per
Well-
entry individual.
It generally is, actually.
But
Not
there is a
always
tomorrow.
beginner, though.
and-
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I guess my real question is that the agenda doesn't leave a lot of flexibility to bring in things that are not listed on the agenda, so.
Right, so I have to say that I've been asked to list who's going to be here because I
Right,
have done
and
it
that-
sort of generically before, and I was, I think last year or the year before, to be more specific. In fact, I even revised tonight's because I really just got the schedule yesterday or this morning, so I did revise it if anyone actually read it.
Now, I'm not, by my comments, I didn't want to suggest that the school administration locally or district-wide is playing cute. I don't mean that at all. The whole point of the question is for more people to know the answers, which, if my own experience as that liaison for the last several years holds true this year, they have got it to the nth large degree. But the public, I think, is entitled to know that and the specifics in the answer. Then they'll vote how they vote.
I don't disagree with that at all. I'm all for educating the voter on what they need to know.
Shall we move on?
So along those lines, I think somebody should be able to give you guidance as to the ability to take up matters that aren't specifically listed on there. I think you have the flexibility to do that. But if need be, if you always want to add
No, we
after
can't.
individual departments, other department budgets as put something generic in there that leaves us a non-specific but line item to take up
Isn't
other
there a
department
standard
budgets.
paragraph at the bottom of
But
it?
we do
There is,
have
and
new and old
I think it
business,
covers it, but.
But,
Well, I was going to originally bring it up under new business, but
yeah, well, yeah, you could have done that, too.
Yeah, but that may reasonably be expected. Well,
That's
to
not new
Jared's
business,
point,
it's
is it
budget.
reasonable to, as a percentage basis, to just sort of bring up, $20-something million?
Right. Yeah, I think we need a little time to consider that, yes. All right, let's move on here. We have no reserve fund transfers. I
I'm
don't
not going to get through it by the time it starts.
think
Really?
we have any meetings.
It's only 20 seconds. It's going to start one more chord and that's it.
Kevin is the king of
Hey, by the way, I'm
boogie.
here, got it?
Okay, any, yeah, I know we don't have any meeting minutes, I think we're caught up. New business. Old business. Public access. Barbara? We're really going to adjourn at 4:08? Whoa.
Wow. Enjoy it while we can.
That's right.
Well, do you have an expectation of when we're going to have a warrant?
No, we didn't.
I think around the, what, second week of April?
Which one is that?
This was, I thought it
Mid-April.
was on the agenda for.
Because we did one on Saturday.
Even if it's,
$400?
a,
I think, is it from Barry?
something we can work to,
Janitorial.
that isn't
Yeah.
official.
Yeah, we did that Saturday.
Just have to have versions.
That was really quick. Yeah.
90 seconds.
All right, is
And I
there
would
a mo-
suggest we not vote and get too far ahead of it,
Right,
but
yes.
we'll do it at the time.
All right, at
I'll second.
8:46.
Jared,
7:46.
7:46, yes, you're right.
Wow.
Boy, my eyes are bad. 7:46, thank you. And Jared, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. We will see you Thursday night.
Is Thursday at 6:32?
No.
It's just tonight because
Yeah,